What's up, everyone? Welcome to today's video. Welcome to the Video Game Fight School channel. Thank you very much for tuning in. So many of you may have noticed I've taken a few days off from YouTube making videos, and it's not necessarily because I wanted to, but the most insane thing happened, and I guess we can talk about it over the course of this video, but not before we look at what the most up-to-date communication or announcement surrounding Gotham Knights actually is. So for those of you who are new to the channel, who are watching this video for the first time, I just want to say welcome. For those of you who've been out here, I just want to say thank you so much for all of your support. So for those of you who may or may not know, about a few days ago, some of our community members, Suspicious Tension and company, alerted me to an interview that was actually conducted by Patrick Redding, actually posted by Patrick Redding, but conducted by Fleur Marty and Jeff Eleanor with some of the journalists, actually one of the journalists, Andrew Reiner, and this is a very important name, over at Game Informer. Now, this particular interview is quite interesting because it's one of the few interviews that really does have a flavor that is somewhat close to what many fans might ask. There were not many questions that were asked in this interview. One thing I would recommend is that you actually go and read for yourself the contents of this interview, because I think it's actually going to be pretty cool in that sense. So a few highlights with this interview are the questions and the way the developers go ahead and answer them. They talk about the number of suits in the game. If you notice number 2, the interviewer and the journalist, Andrew, is already asking that, how many suits are we going to have? And so they're basically saying each night's going to have 11 different suit styles. That's in total about 44, and perhaps maybe any extras that you might get in terms of, say, a package for pre-ordering or getting maybe the, deluxe or collector's edition. You also have Nightwing being someone using traversal in his combat. These are things that we somewhat know, and we also see some story aspects to it. The one really interesting thing that really caught the eyes of a lot of us is the way your co-op is going to be. So this question is really interesting and very simple in a sense. The interviewer asked, I said, if my main is Nightwing and my friend's main also happens to be Nightwing, would one of us have to be a different hero, or could we have an Elseworld situation of two Nightwings together? Jiv says you can make it as weird as you want to. Fleur Marty says, we're leaving it up to players who know some people want to have different characters, but some won't care. I don't want to spoil anything, but there's a funny moment in the game where if you're playing as two of the same character, now, the completion basically says we're giving you the complete freedom. And so this is what the developers are claiming to do. So the interview is quite interesting in a sense. It does have some really interesting flares of things that we may not necessarily have actually considered in a much deeper perspective. Now, this particular surprise of a funny moment that is being referred to, I strongly believe it's probably something where if you get to a story point where there are two of the same characters that are showing up, perhaps the enemy NPCs or the AI or maybe I would say the cutscene is going to respond to the fact that there are two of those particular characters or something like that. I think that's a fun thing that they may put in the game that we might eventually see later down the road. And so that's something that's pretty cool. But nonetheless, though, I mean, with all of the stuff surrounding Gotham Knights and, a lot of the conversations that we've been having all over the place, it's really interesting because I wanted to go ahead and just talk about a few things lately, because this particular, thinking regarding and surrounding Gotham Knights has really got me in a very interesting spot where I'm really looking at this game and hoping that the developers are in a very strong position. And the reason I say that is because just lately I started playing Batman Arkham Knight again. I've put it down, or I had put it down for the longest time, except for some of the challenge maps or the combat. I put down my New Game Plus gameplay for about a year because I got to that point where you have to fight the Arkham Knight in your tank in the city, where you have to fight 7 of those, very special tanks, and then you got to run away and all that, which is like a stealth thing in the, in the Batmobile. And I did that just recently. I finally completed it and I continued playing the game, and I'm at around 7% of my New Game Plus, progression, and it really did remind me a lot of what is in this particular game called Arkham Knight. There is a reason why people compare video games that are in the superhero genre to the Arkham games, and for the longest time we always talk about, say, combat, we always talk about, some really interesting things, but I don't think that those are necessarily the most important reasons that these comparisons get made. In fact, if you go through the Arkham games have already been able to gather over the course of 3 games made by Rocksteady and even 1 game made by Warner Brothers Games Montreal. There was already the opportunity for these games to garner a lot of different gameplay mechanics. They were able to garner a lot of different aspects that made the game unique. So Arkham Asylum started really small in one very tiny area. I say tiny, but in video game world, it's not easy to achieve. And then Arkham City pretty much took it to a little bigger part of a landmark and space. And then Arkham Knight pretty much was just a crescendo, just made everything much more refined. But in between the world building, the level building, the character development, and all of that, you can only say with Arkham Knight, its biggest problem was the story. Because at first we used to say the story and the Batmobile, but actually the truth is it's not necessarily at this point the Batmobile. I think that was just a preference for most players because the so-called Batmobile right now seems to be like a luxury more than anything else. If you can get a game right now where your superhero could really represent not only their own traversal, but a traversal with their own preferred type of automotive or automobile or whatever in a smooth way like you have with the Arkham games, you're in business, you know? I mean, we saw the bike riding in Gotham Knights. And as much as, you know, many people have said their own and shared their own different perspectives, that bike riding still looks a little stiff. The animation is nothing compared to the Batmobile. The Batmobile, yes, did get extremely used in Arkham Knight, but I would say it actually provides a really interesting gameplay dynamic. If you play that game today for the very first time, you're not going to feel it as we did back then. Back in 2015, we were spoiled. The new consoles were coming out. A lot of games had just been dropped on us from the PS3 and Xbox One generations that we had the luxury to open our mouths and complain about that Batmobile. Imagine that. Can you imagine that? Imagine if Arkham Knight dropped today for the very first time ever and we had never seen anything like that before. Just close your eyes and imagine that in 2022, Batman Arkham Knight dropped as a brand new release. The game will literally be contending with Elden Ring right now in terms of game of the year, in terms of, you know, video game that's pretty much rocking the entire conversation. It's just the truth. It's obvious, isn't it? I mean, if you think about it, you know, many games right now that have come out in the past few years have not necessarily been up to par in terms of graphics, in terms of presentation. I mean, look at Arkham Knight. Look at it on the screen right here. You know, graphics, world, you know, art, everything, representation is so pristine that you wonder and say, was this game even made and released in 2015? Even Unreal Engine 3 and older Unreal Engine, you know, SDK. And these are some of the questions that you ask yourself and you say, man, this is a really big deal to go back and look at the quality of these past games in terms of a whole lot of other things. And, you know, you kind of feel for other games that are coming out because they will be measured against that standard. So with the, you know, multiplayer aspect and this conversation that was had with the developers, you know, I'm really interested to see how this mechanic is going to be the highlight of their game, because this is where they're selling it. They're actually selling this particular point that you're going to have the opportunity to get in there, have some co-op with your friends, you know, jump into the open world, explore Gotham. And I'm hoping that these mechanics are polished enough for them to be able to stand out and really bring out what this Arkham game, or I would say Gotham Knights game, let's not say Arkham game, but this game in the Batman universe, which is what the game director, the executive producer, Fleur Marte, actually tagged Gotham Knights as. So these are the expectations that we have, and I'm certain that now that we've already talked past the combat, now that we've already talked past this conversation that it's not an Arkham game or whatever or whatnot, there's still all kinds of different quality concerns that we here in the community have. And, you know, this is kind of the lens, and we can't help it, if you get what I mean. Arkham Knight is just so clean and pristine that you can't help yourself but, you know, look at any other game, if you've played it, you know, in that light. And this is not even to talk about the, you know, the pristine presentation and quality of, say, Spider-Man and all the others. But anyways, I just wanted to point out that little tidbit and talk about just a few things regarding some of the you know, aspects that the developers are looking forward to. I'm still yet to hear a little bit more. They also talk about abilities in this particular interview as well, or I think it's another one, and we'll probably discuss it in another video. So stay tuned. There is a video that one of our audience members pointed me towards, and I'm really excited to share it with you guys. But for now, I'll get out of your hair. I want to hear your thoughts in the comment section. Let me know what you think. So far, so good. We'll talk soon. Peace out.